My name is Melissa Simonson, and I am a radical self-love ambassador on a mission to love the whole world. I am committed through word, action, and example to co-create a world in which people know the freedom and peace that come when they choose to fully love and embrace all of who they are. I am clear that the only way I can create that world is if I fully love and embrace all of myself and choose to claim and use my talents to the best of my ability. And while people may now speak to the confidence through which I express myself, the way that I courageously lead with vulnerability, that I truly embody the self-love that I teach, it's taken me years to get to this point of being willing to claim my vision with such boldness and to love myself enough to speak out loud what I passionately believe in my heart. For years, I was afraid to fully express myself for fear that it was not humble to speak such grand dreams aloud, to claim that I really just want to shine in the biggest way possible. Who does she think she is? A voice would whisper inside my head. And like I said, I am Melissa Simonson, a radical self-love ambassador on a mission to love the whole world. This past December marked a time of significant change for me. A very significant relationship ended, and a week later I found out that the contract work that had been a stable income for me while pursuing my work as a coach and astrologer and singer-songwriter was going to be leaving come January. Suddenly I was faced with the opportunity to build my life anew and begin to step forward and create the life that I truly felt called to in my heart. What I didn't realize until that point is how small I was being in the greater context of my life. On the morning of the winter solstice, I was reading the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks when a breakthrough hit me. In Hendricks' book, dedicated to helping us break beyond our fears and limitations on the path to joyful success, he points out 4 hidden barriers that we can have that cause us to sabotage ourselves on the path to greatness. It was not until I reached the 4th hidden barrier that something inside of me opened up and tears started spilling down my face. It was the fear of outshining others. The fear that by truly stepping into my personal power and greatness that I would overshadow and make others feel less somehow. And suddenly I was 16 again and auditioning for the school musical. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was waiting outside of the choir room with 2 other girls as we anticipated our auditions. The show was Grease that year, and I was trying out for the lead role of Sandy. As I breathed through the nervous jitters that I always experience before any audition, I started thinking about the role, which led me to thinking about the movie starring Olivia Newton-John, and how in the film version of the musical, she was a foreign exchange student from Australia. I wasn't sure if that storyline translated to the off-screen musical, and suddenly, in a mixture of curiosity and nervousness for my audition, I blurted out, "Am I going to have to speak with an Australian accent?" The consequences that followed that exclamation proved very painful and life-shaping for me. Shortly after I found out I'd been offered the lead in the musical, my teacher pulled me aside to talk to me. It turns out that the 2 girls who were waiting to audition along with me approached her and complained about my Australian accent proclamation and expressed how wrong it was that I had just assumed that I was going to get the part. My teacher proceeded to express her surprise to me at this because as she had always respected me for being so humble. Suddenly, the idea that I could be talented and humble was becoming hard for even my teacher to believe. And the painful truth for me was that I was just as nervous as my classmates were. And I knew that my question about the Australian accent was referring to the lines that I might have to read in the audition, and that I never assumed that I would get the part. But it didn't matter what I said at that point because the seed of doubt about me was already planted. I worked so hard to be good, to get it right, to not outshine. I was humble, but I couldn't claim that out loud to my teacher because that wouldn't be humble. And after years of those kinds of experiences throughout my childhood and teenage years, I became a sort of vigilant warrior, doing my best to tiptoe and trying not to be too much in order to avoid stepping on all of the hot coals of other people's misunderstanding. And deep down, all along, there was a little voice telling me that she loved the spotlight, that she longed to be different, to wear shiny clothes and red boots and fancy jewelry and laugh loudly and sing loudly and own her unique brilliance by speaking her truth. There were all of these conflicting messages floating around in my head. You can tell me I'm talented, and I'm supposed to smile and say thank you without fully looking you in the eye, but I can't say that about myself. Yes, I'm supposed to share my gifts, but I'm not supposed to love being in the spotlight too much, or at least I'm not supposed to admit that I like being there. Good girls are sweet and humble and continually put others before themselves. I'm not supposed to call too much attention to myself because I'm taking away an opportunity for someone else to be seen and heard in the process. Pretty soon, I was walking around feeling so contorted inside, I might as well have been a piece of trash squished into a tiny block to make space for all of the other pieces of trash at the landfill. And being the radical self-love ambassador that I know myself to be at my core, after seeing my own clients afraid to take up space and choose to do what really brings them alive, I decided that it was time to start questioning this whole humility thing. In a desire to create more cultural and historical context around the shaming I and others have experienced around self-love and fully claiming our talents, I decided to do a little research on humility, that modest yet oh so powerful word. And here's some of what I found. According to my trusty Merriam-Webster dictionary, the word humble means not proud or haughty, not arrogant or assertive. Okay, not too bad. Reflecting, expressing, or offered in a spirit of deference or submission. Ranking low in a hierarchy or scale, insignificant, unpretentious, not costly or luxurious. Then I dug a little bit deeper. Given that our Western culture has been greatly shaped by a Christian religious doctrine, whether we claim that doctrine for ourselves or not, I found it important to dive into that perspective in order to have a clear context for our cultural relationship with the meaning behind the word. According to the New Advent Catholic Encyclopedia, the word humility signifies lowliness or submissiveness, and it is derived from the Latin humilitas, or as St. Thomas says, from humus, i.e. the earth which is beneath us. The virtue of humility may be defined as a quality by which a person, considering his own defects, has a lowly opinion of himself and willingly submits himself to God and to others for God's sake. St. Bernard defines it, a virtue by which a man, knowing himself as he truly is, abases himself. These definitions coincide with that given by St. Thomas. The virtue of humility, he says, consists in keeping oneself within one's own bounds, not reaching out to things above one, but submitting to one's superior. To get a glimpse at an early Protestant view of humility, there are these words from Martin Luther in his sermon on the Visitation. You must not only think and speak of loneliness, but come into it. Think into it, utterly helpless, that God alone may save you. Or at any rate, should it not happen, you should at least desire it and not shrink. For this reason we are Christians and have the gospel, that we may fall into distress and loneliness, and that God thereby may have his work in us. And exploring pride, considered humility's evil twin, St. Augustine referred to the sin as the love of one's own excellence, while medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas shares that inordinate self-love is the cause of every sin. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Jesus and his core message of love and have embraced many Christian teachings throughout my life. But reading these words regarding humility had me going cross-eyed and ready to double over with nausea. Loneliness? Knowing my defects and thus abasing myself? Sinking into utter helplessness? This doesn't sound like love to me. And according to these definitions, let's face it, I am clearly not and refuse to be humble. So now we have it laid out for us. Self-love capable of being the sin of all sins. Humility, putting others first and debasing oneself, is clearly the way to go. And yet, in a historical and cultural context that has been so attached to the idea of making ourselves less and putting others first, as we heard earlier from vulnerability and shame researcher Brené Brown, incidences of narcissism have more than doubled in the past 10 years. So what's going on here? First, let me be clear. As my friend and self-love colleague Christina Rilo is making it known in her book, Madly in Love with Me, despite the current popular definition of love, narcissism and self-love are a far cry from the same thing. As Christine expresses in the reading we heard earlier, when the word self is placed in front of the indisputable, beautiful, and good word love, this should not change the beauty and the goodness, only the direction in which it flows. One of my favorite definitions of compassion comes from Ayanna von Zandt's book, One Day My Soul Just Opened Up. Von Zandt describes compassion to be like a fountain. There is always water going back in, nourishing the fountain, and compassion is the excess, continually flowing out from the top. When we consistently choose to nourish ourselves by honoring our inner yes and no, by taking time to feed ourselves and our dreams with time and attention, to love ourselves with self-acknowledgement and choosing to share our gifts and inner truths with those around us, we build our capacity to pour love into the world. True love of self is the opposite of narcissism. In her book, Daring Greatly, Brené Brown gets to the root of what narcissism is really about. She writes, "When I look at narcissism through the vulnerability lens, I see the shame-based fear of being ordinary. I see the fear of never feeling extraordinary enough to be noticed, to be lovable, to belong, or to cultivate a sense of purpose." Brown then goes on to describe scarcity, or the deep experience of never being or having enough, as the core root of the narcissism problem. In her book, The Soul of Money, global activist and fundraiser Lynn Twist refers to scarcity as the great lie. She writes, "For me and for many of us, our first waking thought of the day is, I didn't get enough sleep. The next one is, I don't have enough time. Whether true or not, that thought of not enough occurs to us automatically before we even think to question or examine it. We spend most of the hours and the days of our lives hearing, explaining, complaining, or worrying about what we don't have enough of. Before we even sit up in bed, before our feet touch the floor, we're already inadequate, already behind, already losing, already lacking something. And by the time we go to bed at night, our minds are racing with a litany of what we didn't get or didn't get done that day. We go to sleep burdened by those thoughts and wake up to that reverie of lack. This internal condition of scarcity, this mindset of scarcity, lives at the very heart of our jealousies, our greed, our prejudice, our arguments with life." So wait a minute here. Let's go back and visit those definitions of humility that I mentioned earlier. Lowliness, submissiveness, insignificance, having a lowly opinion of oneself, abasing oneself. These very definitions of the word humility are actually at the heart of causing a culture of narcissism. It is the young people and grown-ups alike who, in their own sense of inadequacy, insignificance, and unworthiness, are comparing themselves to others. We can't help but see all of the ways that we don't measure up and try to bring people with recognizable talent and self-expression down to size. It is in our lack of belief that it is okay to own and celebrate our unique strengths that we are creating a culture in which people have no idea how special and extraordinary that they truly are. And so today, I am taking a stand for a new definition of humility that is not about hiding or making oneself less. I'm inviting us to create a new definition of humility that challenges us to seek out and celebrate the unique strengths in everyone, including ourselves. And rather than coming from a place of scarcity in this new definition of humility, I invite us to come from a place of abundance and gratitude consciousness. Whether you choose to believe in a higher power or you choose to revel in the interconnectedness of all existence or both, true humility comes from a place of understanding that we didn't get to be who we are all on our own, that there were people and opportunities and forces beyond our control shaping and uplifting us to where we are now. When we see that we are each a single glorious thread in a much larger tapestry, we cannot help but be in awe of all that is available to us and the greatness that surrounds us. And one person's success cannot take away from another's. When we truly get that we are all enough, we can't help but delight in the shining of those around us. When we choose to seek out the extraordinary in one another, we come to see that everyone is worth celebrating. Rather than fearing that we might outshine one another, I invite all of us to dive in and get to know our own individual inherent strengths and to own them with gusto. According to a Gallup study, people who have the opportunity to focus on their strengths every day are 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs and more than 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life in general. Knowing who we are and fully expressing our strengths makes us feel a sense of purpose. It helps us get that we are enough and allows us to contribute to the world in powerful ways. The more we understand our significance, the more we have to offer in service to the greater good. As my friend Christina Rilo says, self-love is not a dirty word. Feeling truly good about who you are, claiming your sense of worth, owning your inherent wisdom, speaking up about your needs, feeling proud and blessed to be born as you, allowing yourself to be fully expressed. Imagine a world in which people fully accepted and embraced who they are. A world in which people shined without shame. That is a world in which love overflows like a fountain. And that is the world that I am committed to creating with you. And so I'm done hiding out and playing it small. I'm done contorting myself into a tiny cube of trash. And finally, claiming my individual strengths, I'm clear that I was built to be a loving light beam in the world. And I now get that being fully expressed might make me a shiny target for cruelty and misunderstanding from those who believe that deep down they are not enough. And that only fuels my mission to spread this love even farther. In reflecting on this new definition of humility as celebrating our collective shining, I'm reminded of Marianne Williamson's famous quotation from her book, Return to Love. And first I'll note that I kept the God parts in this quotation because I love them, and for those of you less fond of the God parts, I invite you to simply listen for the underlying message. Williamson writes, we ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, gorgeous, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Make no mistake. I am brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. And I can't wait to discover all of the ways that the same is true for you. So I'm gonna shine on, and I hope you shine on too. 'Cause this world needs love from me and from you. So let yourself shine through. 'Cause this world needs love from me and from you. So let yourself shine through. Blessed be.